Pressing record. It is recording already. Matt, did you do that?
Yeah, I did it, but you should be able to do it on your computer as well.
I don't think so. It looks like you're going to have, we'll talk about it later, but you're going to have the recording.
Okay, sounds good.
Figure it out.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. If you are not a speaker, we're asking you to mute and turn off your video for now. We'll turn things back on later. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Lindholm. I'm the chair of Marine Science, the Marine Science Department, which we'll talk a little bit about here later. And I have the good fortune professor of Marine Science and Policy here. And on behalf of my program manager, Carrie Bretz, who's here on the line, who helped really put this thing together, we're welcoming all of you, including tonight's panel. This is going to be a fun. So tonight's event, as I mentioned, is hosted by the professorship. So real quickly, Jim Rote was a trained marine scientist, trained at Hopkins here at Stanford's Hopkins Marine Lab. He gave up his career in science to go back and forth to Sacramento to make sure that science policy was informed by the best available science. I think he was also a founding faculty member of CSUMB. So I think he would be very excited to see the suite of programs that we have represented here, from the original ESSP days to the ESTP days to the Marine Science days, and including the grad programs. That was the first was QUISP, and then AMWA, now Environmental Science. So we got a lot of different programs represented, and that's very exciting. A couple tidbits that I want to point out to the panel as well as the rest of the attendees. Unlike various moments in which our panelists were here at CSUMB, things have changed a lot recently. Marine Science is now a standalone department, more than 550 marine science alone, and 43 graduate students. It was the first and is the largest marine science program across the 23 campuses of the CSU, which is daunting. And many of you are also veterans of the dive program, which immediately prior to COVID, we were teaching classes 7 days a week every semester and running research around the year. And we're now, by all estimations, the largest university dive program in the country. So you guys were all founding members of something that's really grown radically since some of you have departed. So I would love to introduce the panelists myself, particularly because I have some really good stuff on some of the panelists. But in reflecting on this, I realized the panelists also have some pretty good stuff on me. And so rather than avoiding that particular conflict, we're going to turn over the introductions to the panelists themselves. But first, a few logistics. So for those of you the panelists are going to keep their video on, and once we start talking, they'll keep their mics on, and we're going to let them answer questions. We received a large number of questions in advance. We kind of process those, bin them into different categories, and tweak them a little bit so that all 7 panelists have a shot at answering all 7 questions. And we're going to go through some of those and see how far we get. We are going to be tracking, I will be watching the chat directly. So if you have questions that come to mind, put them in the chat. Maybe we'll get to them at the end of the talk. We'll see. We're going to try to go through till about 7:30. Being sensitive of people's time, we have somebody from the Eastern time zone here and somebody from Central Canadian time, maybe. And we have Mountain Time. Yeah. And we have an attendee from Ireland. Monica's up already in the middle of the night, so maybe we'll just keep on going. I don't know, Monica. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. We used a random number generator to determine the order in which they're going to go in a truly scientific fashion. It was an app on an iPhone. And we gave them a prompt for their introductions. First question was really, what do you do now? And then the other, in some detail, in 2 to 3 minutes. And we'd like to know, what do you remember most about CSUMB? And given that we're going to be talking about plenty of detail about their time at CSUMB later, this is an opportunity to reflect on some perhaps non-traditional memories that they have. But please keep them clean. It's a family program. So the random order, we start with Jessica, then we'll go to Jason, then Alex, then Marina, then Josh, then Max, then Katie. And then every question after that will rotate. So everybody's going to get a chance to take the first shot at answering a question. So for that, I'm going to turn over the intros, and Jessica, you're going to start things off.
Okay, thanks, James. So my name is Jessica Watson, and I work for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's Marine Resources Program. And for the first 5 years at ODFW, I worked specifically with the Marine Reserves Program here in Oregon, doing a lot of field monitoring to look at ecological indicators of marine reserve performance in Oregon's we would have 5 unique marine reserves here off the coast. This included leading surveys using some of our core monitoring tools, which include scuba diving, video landers, hook and line, so kind of fishing for science, so catch and release, and also ROVs, so remotely operated vehicles. Now though, instead of in the field, I can be found in my office and in meetings, using the information collected by our field staff when representing Oregon in regional stakeholder groups, policy councils, and commissions that make marine resource management decisions. This includes participating in international delegations. So I am part of the US delegation for highly migratory species, where we represent the US interests in international management of tunas, sharks, and billfish. As well as representing the Pacific Fisheries Management Council as a member of Oregon, representing Oregon as a member on the highly migratory species management team that is managing highly migratory species domestically. In addition, I promote ecosystem fisheries-based management practices throughout the California Current as a member of the Ecosystem Working Group, also with the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, so kind of bring across disciplines some of this information on changing climates and shifting ranges. And mostly what I do on a day-to-day basis as the Marine Resources Policy Project Leader at ODFW is I kind of work with balancing conservation of marine resources as well as human uses and the conflicts that arise between the two when they interact. And I work really hard to bring partners and community members together to ensure that expertise and local knowledge is used when making some of these management decisions for both the conservation of our resources and also their future use. And I would say when it comes to CSUMB, I'm kind of an earlier member of this panel, but Jason was before me. But my favorite memory is that when I first got there, it was known as University of Fort Ord, or UFO. I still have the sweater, and the science building had not opened yet when I applied, but it was promised to by the time I got there. And I remember exploring abandoned buildings because they were everywhere, and I'm sure that is not the case anymore.
You unmute. Thank you, Jessica. All right, next up is Jason.
Nice. Hey, Dr. Lindholm. Good evening, team. I appreciate the chance to be here and engage with you all tonight. My name is Jason Mansour. I am a commander with the United States National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration Commissioned Officer Corps. I graduated from ESSP in 2003. I'm really old. And went right into the service. And I've been at it for 17 years now. It is a privilege. My first job in the NOAA Corps was I was assigned to a fishery research trawler in the Bering Sea. I mean, like deadliest catch kind of stuff. And our job was to monitor the fishing practices of pollock, which is a really big fishery. And I got seasick every 4 hours. I mean, like, it was bad. No exaggeration. Every 4 hours, just, you know. And I'm like, hey, this is great. Can I fly now? So yeah, Jay, go fly. So I stuck it out. I got my wings in '06, and flying with NOAA, I could be looking at polar bears in the Arctic, sea turtles in Mexico, endangered whales in Cape Cod. So all over the country. I did a tour downtown in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, and I was naive. I thought, you know, Navy missiles, you know, NOAA, whales, you know, where's the overlap? And there's so much overlap, especially now with environmental intelligence, environmental data, the impact of the climate on the nation's infrastructure. And so there's a lot of demand for scientific expertise, as scientific professionals like yourselves right now, in my opinion. So your timing is outstanding. My current role is a hurricane hunter pilot. I'm in command of an aircraft, and we go above, around, and into hurricanes for science. My mom thinks I'm an idiot, but that's okay. One of my best memories of ESSP, of CSUMB, is, it might not be going on right now, but it was called Capstone, where you would go with your upper division team. And I mean, we're talking like back then, 12 people that you have gone up the whole, your academic career at CSUMB with for like a week and a half. And you experience every microcosm of California, and just having that personal and academic bonds and trust and respect and kind of just accumulation of your academic career as an undergraduate. I'll never forget that. That was a privilege. So grateful to be here. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alex Davis. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow, conservation fellow in Canada. So despite living in the middle of Canada, I am still working in the marine realm. Currently, I work on invasive species removal, and so I am working in a couple different systems. So for my PhD, I did a lot of work in the Bahamas and the Caribbean, working on invasive lionfish, and so I'm still working in that system, looking at removal efficacy and figuring out ways to be most efficient and most time efficient and the least amount of cost to put into removing species. And I recently got a fellowship to do a similar project here in Canada with European green crab, which is another highly invasive species, all up and down the coast of California, Oregon, Washington, and Canada, all the way into Alaska. So I'm really excited to start on that project because it's been a long time since I've done intertidal ecology, probably since I was at CSUMB. So I actually started at CSUMB in 2004, and I was recruited to help start the water polo team there. So that is kind of one of my fun stories. Yep, Katie, one of my prodigies. So I have a lot of firsts from CSUMB. So I was the first person to play, one of the first people to play water polo there. One of the first people to live in North Quad, which was also kind of a weird experience. I remember specifically sitting in North Quad at like 9 p.m. Out in the middle trying to get cell phone reception because you couldn't get it inside of the buildings. And so you just see people walking around during peak hours trying to like call their moms and stuff like that. And I remember the first day I got a phone call inside a building at CSUMB, and my dad called, and I just looked at the phone and I was like, there's cell phone reception here now, what a day. And so that was kind of an interesting experience. I actually started as a human communications major. I have no idea what you guys call it now, maybe just English, since that's what most people call it. And then after I got that degree, I transitioned into ESTP, and then ended up being the first person to graduate from CSUMB with a marine science degree. So a whole lot of firsts for me, which isn't always great, but it is kind of fun in retrospect. So I don't remember who was after me, but
let me figure that out. Next up is Marina.
Hey everyone, my name is Marina Hernandez. I recently graduated at CSUMB. I started in 2016, and I moved out here literally the day after graduating high school. My sister was also a CSUMB student, so I came in and moved in with her, but I've pretty much been visiting this area since I was about 6 years old, on a field trip to the aquarium, and that was a life-changing experience, obviously, because it kept bringing me back for more. I also was part of the dive program. I started diving probably like my second year at CSUMB, so I was a little bit late in the game, but I was determined to get through all 4 classes so that I can finish off with research diving and doing the whole capstone thing. That was probably one of the most memorable times at CSUMB, being able to dive across California. It's kind of what helped me get through this whole thing. And I'm now doing my master's at Moss Landing Marine Labs. I also got involved with them my second year at CSUMB. I was one of the first CSU Coast Scholars, and had the opportunity to intern at the Phycology Lab. So now I'm studying with the phycology students. And yeah, that's pretty much my story here.
Cool, thank you, Marina. All right, Josh, you are next up.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz, and I've been finishing up my dissertation for about 3 years now, but I'm ever closer. I study basic and applied kelp forest ecology, and over the last few years, what that means is I've done a lot of experiments in the ocean, actually setting up cages and doing observational and experimental studies to look at the role of sea otters and sea urchins in helping to maintain what's behind me in that photo. And everybody here will want me to tell you that Monterey Bay always looks like this, but that's not entirely true. And one of my best memories at CSUMB, hands down, was my very first time going in the ocean. It did not look like this. And my dive buddy and I were locking arms because you couldn't see anything. But the dive instructor then picked up a sea star and showed it to me. And I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And I went back into the advisor's office and said, I want to change my major to marine science.
Cool, thank you, Josh.
Yep.
All right, Max, you're up next.
All right, my name is Maxwell Seal, and I'm the Central Coast Volunteer Coordinator for the Reef Check Foundation. It's a California chapter. Reef Check operates in over 100 countries and territories, pretty much all over the world. And I'd say that California is probably one of many of our most mature programs, that's for sure. We do kelp forest or rocky reef surveys at 135 different locations in California to both assess ecosystem health and the effectiveness of marine protected areas. I think we operate in like 38 of those locations are marine protected areas. As far as what I do, I am in charge of more or less managing all the boots on the ground from Sonoma all the way down through Morro Bay. So that oceanography would be Point Arena all the way down to Point Bouchon, Point Conception. It's a huge area latitudinally, and it puts me in the field a lot. I'm diving, especially because of COVID this year, almost every day collecting data at some new location, which is fantastic. It allows us access to places like Point Sur, restricted dive zones that only scientists can operate in, which is really awesome. The diving in Big Creek and Morro Bay is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that most importantly, getting to quantify the effectiveness of a marine protected area is visually and inherently getting to see how lively these places are. And that comes to another point. Another big part of my job is getting to outreach to a lot of community members and the press about how important these resources are using our data, which is fantastic. The goal of Reef Check is to inspire community members, volunteers, citizen scientists to participate actively in collecting data to this 15-year data set to help inform adaptive management for these marine conservation areas. It's fantastic stuff. And I think that one of my most fond sets of memories would be how absolutely painful staying up at the library at like 1 o'clock at night, trying to cram for an exam the next day, specifically getting to take a walk out of the library and getting to awe at how beautiful the view of the ocean and how absolutely incredible the views of the galaxies can be sometimes. I think that really tied it all back in for me, especially to be able to appreciate science as a whole. So.
Cool. Thank you, Max. All right, last but not least, Katie, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Soul. I am the lead abalone biologist and the diving safety officer for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife up here in Olympia. I got my start right after college, actually, because of Dr. Corey Garza, who's here today. I was diving for the MLEL, and I will always remember that I asked to work for him, and he was like, well, you got a really bad grade in my class, so I'm not sure, but he hired me anyway, and that's what started my career. Right after that, I worked for California Department of Fish and Wildlife on the salmon project, ended up working at a dive shop for a year, and then got a job at the Bodega Marine Lab for their abalone project, dove a bunch. My main job was to put abalone back in the water where there weren't abalone, or there used to be abalone, and to restore the white abalone population and monitor the red abalone population. And then I got a job about a year, almost a year and a half ago, for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife as their lead biologist for the pinto abalone restoration project. And this job is half and half, so half pinto abalone biologist, half diving safety officer, which kind of worked out for me because I was getting ready to, I wanted to be a DSO eventually, but I never wanted to give up abalone. And in California, the abalone funding was kind of squirrely. So I was like, oh, I'll eventually be a DSO. And then this job opened up and I was like, it has my name written all over it. So I'm in charge of bringing back pinto abalone to the San Juan Islands area and the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And I'm in charge of the dive team here. So we have a smaller dive team. It's about 16 people, but it's pretty awesome. And I love my job. And I would definitely not have been able to be here if it wasn't for CSUMB. And just because I know James is going to tell this story anyway, one of my favorite memories is one time I lived in East Campus way before I was supposed to, and I was late for the shuttle and I didn't catch it. So I came back to my car in the driveway and I set the expensive underwater camera that I was borrowing on the back of my car, run in to grab something, came out, of course, forgot that it was on the back of my car, drove right away and watched it get run over by the car behind me and smashed to smithereens. And I was so terrified to tell James and Frank, and eventually fessed up and said I had a huge accident. I made a mistake. And I thought they'd be like, you're done here, you have no future. And instead they pretty much laughed at me and said, you're almost done here. This is the last straw. And here I am, and I'm happy to be here, happy to chat with you guys.
Thank you, Katie. By the way, we've gotten so much mileage out of that story that I know it's been invaluable to us. So thank you.
I have never made that mistake again. I have lost one more, but
that was it happens.
Accident.
All right. Well, I gotta say that thank you so much for those introductions, team. Those were great, and you guys are all responsible for such an impressive array of stuff. I mean, if we stopped right now and didn't answer any more questions, it's just been very interesting to listen to all the good stuff you guys are doing. Congratulations on all that work so far. All right, so we're going to get to the questions now, and the first category of questions are really related to the time at CSUMB. And we're rotating through. Jason, you're going to be first up here, and the question, kind of a compounded question like many of them will be. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your time here, what did you focus your time on? And were there any, for instance, were there any particular tech skills or things that you made it your goal to come out of here with?
Excellent question. So primarily my focus at CSUMB, I got a lot from underdivision, from that kind of mercurial chem, bio, calculus, math, and I'm like, I'm not going to use this in the real world. There's no way. And I couldn't have been more wrong. So my focus was to be a sponge at the freshman, sophomore levels. But I knew I enjoyed the ocean. I knew I wanted to engage environmental sciences. The skills that I didn't know I wanted, but Ms. Bretz and Dr. Kavitek and Dr. Sorg Wood and Susie Worcester, right? They just impressed upon me the importance of discipline, scientific integrity, GPS, GIS, no joke, seafloor mapping, obviously. So those skills, they made tangible for me to realize that if I focused on these, my professional aspects post CSUMB could improve substantially, and they're absolutely right.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Alex, you're up next. So again, this was a little bit about your time, maybe with a focus on technical skills that you picked up while you were here, or chose to focus on.
Actually, I think one of the best skills I got out of being at CSUMB at the time period I was writing a good CV, because none of the names of anything that we did there meant anything outside of CSUMB. Nobody knew what HCOM was or ESTP. And so selling yourself and the skills that you do get was kind of a cool thing to think about, and how to explain what you're doing to people completely outside of the system. But I'll, reiterate what Jason said, like, my GIS, GPS skills and my seafloor mapping skills have taken me quite a long way, as well as my scientific diving skills. Almost every single position as a grad student and now as a postdoc that I've gotten, I use those skills daily. And so that was really cool. And then I think just like through the UROC program, because I spent a lot of time there while I was doing my science degree, learning how to read papers and how to write and how to edit was also really, really helpful. You will never be done writing anything, even after it's gotten published. And so just being able to be okay with imperfection, and then know that you can always do a different draft later and then keep editing and keep revising, that I think is something that's really helpful to know. So.
Cool, thank you. Marina.
Yeah, so kind of just to reiterate what everybody's been saying, those basic skills in scientific research and diving, GIS, all that. But just to mention, I am pretty early in my career still, so obviously having those basic knowledge skills like calculus, stats, especially, because coding is really big in the research field now, so definitely focus on, gaining that basic knowledge.
All right, thanks, Marina. Josh.
Yeah, I too echo all the technical skills like those before me have said. The technical skills that I learned at CSUMB, I use almost every single day. And there's always so much to learn. So like with coding, I'm still learning how to code, even though I had my first introductory coding class at CSUMB. The one thing I would add is, at least in my case at CSUMB, it took me about a year to kind of figure out where I wanted to go. But after that, I kind of knew that I wanted to continue doing research. And so one thing that I really focused on was how to think critically. And I learned to do that for a number of programs at CSUMB. But one thing that was really unique at CSUMB is the availability of doing actual research, because when you're doing research, you're doing things that people haven't done before. And so you're actually advancing the front of knowledge, and there's no prescriptive way of how you should be doing what you're doing. And so you have to use all of those technical skills that you're learning and apply them in a way that allows you to achieve something new. And so during my time at CSUMB, that was one of the key skills that I think has really served me well today, was being able to think in a critical way.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Max, you're up next.
Yeah, I would echo all of those technical skills. I think that I encounter a lot of people that had finished their programs elsewhere in similar fields, marine science, marine biology, and I'm sometimes surprised at how limited information or knowledge they've been taught in things like R or so forth. And sure, they'll still succeed, but I think that technical skills are super important. It's great to focus on. And I think the sum total of any ecological class that you could take if you wanted to, or were planning on deciding in pursuing marine ecology or so forth, so incredible, because those higher level classes, once you start finishing your lower division courses, really help shape your direction and your research interests and your career interests. I think that sort of knowing and feeling comfortable with where your direction is when you get to your third year or even earlier sets you up for success. Super, super important. I think that because the classes are smaller and because you get to know your professors a little bit more intimately is another tremendous help as well. So.
Cool. Thanks, Max. Katie.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everybody has said. I really jumped into scientific diving because I knew that's what I wanted my career to be, and put a lot of focus on that, and ended up becoming Frank's assistant to help him fill tanks, just because I wanted to learn the logistical side. So I knew that's kind of what I wanted to have in my career and wanted to learn all about that. The policy class, I'm not just saying this because James is here, but the policy class and the capstone class that I took with James taught me so much, because I knew I wanted to be in fisheries, but I didn't have the connection with laws and government and how that all works. So I dove into policy classes as well. And then, I don't know, do you guys still call it QFM? What Susie teaches?
She still teaches that, but now Corey actually teaches a marine science version of it. It's called Marine Quantitative Methods. Okay,
yeah. That class was, I just remember being blown away with how much, once I left CSUMB, I was using it like exactly what I learned in that class, because we would have to collect data in the field, and you would have to take it through the whole process of, collecting it in bad conditions in the ocean, all the way to like publishing a paper with it and everything. And that class was like spot on with that. And I will say that CSUMB is an epic spot, because you get private school education of like very small classes, which I really loved. And it was just like the connection to the professors and everything. It's just pretty epic. And I remember actually being working with Corey's group right afterwards, and one of his master's students went to UC Santa Barbara, and not to talk trash on Santa Barbara, but I was comparing all of my undergrad classes with him, and he was like, we never ever went outside. And I was like, we were always outside. So that was like the best part of CSUMB, and I jumped into all that stuff.
Cool, thanks, Katie. Jessica, is there anything that you...
So ditto on everything. You pretty much hit the policy to the technical skills. I would say the one thing I would add is the networking. The small classes and the cohort and the connections you make with your fellow students, as well as your professors and your TAs. I have used those connections throughout my career, and James can attest to this. When I have a question about ROV methods, I have people I can reach out to with an email or a call, and that is priceless. The marine science world is very small, and being able to use the people and the connections that you have and have them use you as resources really helps move things forward. So everyone's not always reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of things that we're all doing in different parts of our work that are similar, and having those resources and being able to reach out because you've made these deeper connections through late night study sessions for some ridiculous take-home midterm that maybe James assigned in his first year of being a professor there, or something like that. You make these connections and these bonds, and being able to use those are extremely great. Like if I have a question about a job that I want to apply for or a study, I have connections to people, or people who are willing to connect me to others. And I think that's extremely valuable, as well as all the technical skills and being just interdisciplinary, which is what CSUMB excels at.
Thanks, Jessica. And we're actually we'll circle back to this idea of networking at a later question. So I want to follow up. I want to depart from the script altogether based on some of your answers. Many of you, I think, like me and like many of the people on the call, probably were originally that captivated by scuba diving, like for scuba diving's sake. And GIS is just cool, right? So, but I think several of you touched on that it's really also important to think about the application of that stuff, right? Because we have, as you can imagine, I think there are a lot of people on the call. We draw a lot of CSUMB who want to do all those things. But I guess if you don't all have to answer, but if anyone wants to reflect on how important it is to kind of take the cool tool, but actually apply it think about it as a vehicle for answering a science question. Does that make sense? Anybody want to hold forth on that? Whatever order you want to do it in. Anybody who wants to hold forth? Yeah, sure, Jessica.
So like with the Marine Reserves program here in Oregon, also with the works I do with fisheries management, we're constantly looking for fishery independent data to help with stock assessments and assessing different marine resources. And so there's all this information that comes from fisheries or people out there catching fish, but there's not much information that comes from the species that doesn't involve catching them. But it does with a lot of the things like scuba diving. And so being able to come up with a method that can fit into a stock assessment and be used by the people who are making the management decisions. So when I'm sitting in my council seat and scientists are providing information, if it's in a usable way and answering questions that we have specifically outlined that are gaps in the information knowledge that will help us make a better management decision, that is huge and always welcomed at the table. So I think being able to use those skills to create the question, but then also understanding who's making the management decisions and what information they need and in what format and time frame they need it. Sometimes the time frames don't line up. So there can be a marine reserve study, but the time series isn't long enough, so it's not really being able to be used in a stock assessment. Versus, you know, sometimes it's just we need a specific question about mortality or something like that. That could be an experimental design and then also modeled. So I think that you touched on a good point, James, of you need to like use these cool tools and things that we love to do that get us excited in science. And if you are able to connect it to a question that management needs an answer for, like that is like the holy grail. And it feels great when like I can take information and use it to make a better informed decision for, you know, not only the resource, but the people using that resource.
Thanks, Jessica. Anybody else want to jump in on it? Jason, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Dr. Lindholm, I'll say that on a holistic point of view, I think it's very important to do what gets you stoked. So if there is a course out there that resonates with you, right, identify with that and get after it, because I believe that if you pursue that just innate passion in each of us, that will organically open up possibilities in the future. So take time, assess your options, and just actively seek what gets you excited and execute.
All right. Yes, Alex.
I'll just add, I think one of the things that's really neat about having such a diverse skill set, being able to like use remote sensing data, being able to dive and collect your own data and do a bunch of different things. I'm finding it super helpful now that I can't go into the field and do anything because I've got stuff I can do. My projects no longer hinge on me being able to go into the field and collect data, which is really, really nice because I can still use all these other skill sets that I've learned, whether it be like just doing statistical analyses or going through video data from ROV or from cameras. And so being able to not hinge a project on one type of data collection is really, really nice. It's also, you know, kind of a luxury that not everybody can afford. But if you have these skill sets and you have the ability to do a bunch of different things as you're creating a project or working with people, it gives you a little bit of flexibility when something doesn't work out, which is really, really nice and kind of a really key point right now through this whole thing that we're going through, because I have undergrads going through video right now who couldn't go out in the field this summer and count fish for real. And so they're still getting a little bit of Florida waters, even though luckily they don't have to go there. But, you know, so that for me was like, you know, I collected every bit of data I could and every different type of data set I could, and that has really helped out now. So
cool. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? All right, excellent. So the next question, I should say, so the next question is basically thinking back. So you guys all talked about, and there was a great deal of unanimity about the things that you did take advantage of when you were here. So this next question says, thinking back, were there opportunities you wish you'd exploited further, or possibly, you know, didn't exploit at all, but would like to? And I'm going to say to the whole audience, in all honesty, I told them that I'm going to mute them if they say study computer science or something like that. So if they go off the rails and say something other than marine science, we might lose their contact with them. But other than that, please tell us, you know, if you want to, if there were things that you think, hey, you know what, I wish I would have done, be really interesting because I'm sure that is as powerful as the things that you did take advantage of. And I think first up for this one is Alex.
Like the worst person to ask for this. I was at CSUMB as an undergrad for like 9 years. I looked at everything I could possibly. Like I had a professor tell me to stop taking his classes so I could graduate. So don't do that. Graduate in a timely manner if that is within your means. But yeah, I'm looking back, like I don't know if there's anything I'm like, man, I really wish I would have done that. I did the dive program, you know, I was able to be a student athlete. I took almost every class the marine science, I think I probably took every class the marine science program had to offer at the time. And so I did a little bit of work with you, James. I worked in the seafloor mapping lab. I don't know that, well, I'm trying to think, Corey, did I do any field work with you? Maybe that's where I'm lacking my intertidal ecology skills. And so, yeah, don't let the intertidal ecology skills pass you by, because now I need them and maybe I should have done a little bit more work there.
All right, thank you. Next up, Marina. This is all fresh in your mind, right?
Yeah, well, compared to what Alex is saying, it took me 4 years to finish up, so that's was a lot of me like taking classes over summer, or you know, just piling on a bunch of units every semester. I think for like my last 3 semesters I did like 18 plus units, and that was definitely, I was about to like burn myself out, but thankfully I guess fortunately COVID happened, so I was able to kind of, you know, simmer down at home and then just be able to take the time to kind of catch up on everything. But yeah, I kind of do wish that I would have had a little bit more time to, you know, kind of exploring everything. But at the same time, I kind of appreciate the time that I spent there and how quickly I was able to gain all this knowledge. And also would have liked for myself to have been a little bit more confident in the decisions that I was making, because I was going in the path that I wanted to, but just being in the situations that I was kind of not as confident, or I didn't seek out the support enough. So definitely, if you need it, reach out. There's so many resources at CSUMB that are available to you, so definitely take advantage of that.
Thanks, Marina. And I think you did an excellent job of reaching out. I remember very early that some of your inquiries, so that was great. I mean, you did exactly what you should do. That was really well played. Okay, next up is Josh.
I echo Marina that there's so many resources at CSUMB that it's hard not to take advantage of them. I mean, between CSUMB and where I'm at now, I've worked in some capacity with a number of different institutions. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but CSUMB has amazing resources relatively to what else is out there. And I say this genuinely because this might come up later in a different question, but where I'm at now, I would totally not be here had it not have been from the diving program at CSUMB. I had no idea that this is what I would end up doing. And so, like I mentioned earlier, when I started my first year at CSUMB, I didn't know what I would do, but because of the resources that were there, I ended up finding pretty quickly what it is that I wanted to continue doing.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Max, where are you? There you are.
Yeah, I think I would echo all of those. I think in particular, every day I kick myself for not getting to take bio-OSH. It's just the one class, because it wasn't until after I had graduated I realized that is one part of marine science is like huge and beautiful, and I don't know, I ended up, just because of how angry I was about not being able to take that class, I bought the textbook and I've been putting my nose to the grind. But I think and this goes for any class that, and there were a plethora of classes I wish I could have taken, if only you had infinite time. It's just because when you graduate and you weren't able to capture that data in lecture, becoming an independent learner is a great tool that you learn in in undergrad, and something that you should always carry on beyond. There is an excellent amount of resources, from seminars to papers, of course, those papers that you're forced to read in class that you now get to read on your own outside of class when you graduate. That is a wealth of knowledge that I think springs forth curiosity and really drives forward kind of interests you want to explore when you graduate. So in all, I think that sure, there may have been resources I may not have been able to use, but now that I don't have to worry about tomorrow's homework, I get to explore a lot of those more, which is great. But
cool, thanks, Max. Katie, any thoughts on this one?
I have a few. It's kind of funny because I never took marine biology, and now I'm a marine biologist, but I never took marine biology class, and it just didn't work out with my water polo schedule. And then I got like right past college, everyone was speaking in scientific names, and I was like, oh no, I really messed up. I don't know what anyone's talking about. So take marine biology if you want to be a marine biologist. And then the other thing is just like everyone was saying, the opportunities are endless. UROC was huge, and I see Bobby on here. He really helped me out. The thing, I don't regret it because I squeaked in, but I almost didn't take a UROC internship in Costa Rica because I thought I couldn't afford it. And I ended up reaching out to UROC, and they were like, do not go because you can't afford it. Like, we have resources. So just reach out if you think that you can't do something, and CSUMB, the people there will try to help you get to where you are, get to where you want to be. And then the last thing I would say is James, do you guys still have Toastmasters there?
I think it exists, but I don't know how lively it is, because when you were here, it was kind of peaking because there were some grad students really interested in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a Toastmasters group which teaches you to public speak, and I did go to a few of them. And I would say if you are getting into science, and especially like if your job is going to have something to do with scientific communication, like for example, if you work for the state and you have to present things to lawmakers, or if you're just wanting to go to grad school and eventually you're going to have to present, if there's a public speaking class, like a Toastmasters class, like I thought that I was a good public speaker, and then I watched one of my speeches and I was like, whoa, I think that I'm presenting differently. And it really does help. Like we did practice speeches, and it just ups your confidence. And I've had to give so many more talks than I would ever thought that I would have to give. And now I love it, but for a while, like it was really hard. And I think a lot of us struggle with that, especially with a big audience. Like I remember my capstone, I was just like, the presentation, I was just like freaking out right before. But if there is a public speaking class and you think that that's going, even if you don't think that's going to be part of your career, it probably is. So I would encourage a public speaking class.
Cool. Thanks, Katie. Before I turn over to Jessica, just because you and Max both brought this up, we talked about the growth in the program. So marine science now has a core set of courses. Marine bio, marine ecology, biological oceanography, and quantitative marine science are like the students who just came in, the 180 that we just started this fall, all have to take those. That core will be the same for all of them, which I think will hopefully make their experience better as a result of, they're all going to go through them together too, which should be kind of interesting. So we're trying to we've been incrementally building the program since you guys were here. And so I think it's moving in the right direction based on the points you guys just made. Jessica.
Yeah, I would just echo, like, similar to Katie and Max about, like, I do regret not taking some classes or having to audit them. So like ichthyology, as someone who's in fisheries management, it's good to know about the fish. So I audited ichthyology at Moss Landing instead of taking it. And that's something that, it would have been great to actually have taken that course and had the time instead of to be audited. When you audit a course, I feel like you don't always invest the same amount of effort. And then, though I wouldn't say that I would have not done marine science and done computer science, I do think that I regret not like minoring in computer science, because so much of marine science nowadays has this computer science nexus, whether it be coding or modeling or creating your own Shiny app with data visualization so that you can show your data to more people. I mean, I feel like when I was at CSUMB, R was brand new and we just had a console. And we had to code directly into it. There were no packages and all the things. So a lot of the times I feel like I'm kind of playing catch up with that because specifically at a state agency, our resources are limited. And so I have to not only conduct the science, but I have to also manage it and make sure that I have all of the databases and queries and like it's just the whole package, like everyone's been talking about. And CSUMB really sets you up for that in the sense that you're able to like dip into all the different other majors. Like I use more of my math skills from the math classes I take than I ever thought I was going to when I was in them. And so I feel like that is one thing that hindsight, I would have also dipped my toe more into the computer sciences because it is such an integral part of the science that we do today.
Cool, thanks, Jessica. I was moving towards the mute button, but you pulled it off. Jason.
Hey, I'll keep it tight. Something that Maxwell said cued me, and I appreciate that, Maxwell. You used the word explore. And I would say it's easy to get down there at your desk, in your dorm, in your apartment, open the books and just grind it out. Monterey is such a rich environment, and North and Southern California, like get off campus if you can, right? Go explore the area. You might find inspiration, find the application of your experiences and knowledge. So I wish I would have spent more time off campus and enjoying the local area.
Cool, thanks, Jason. All right, so Marina, you're up next for the next question. You're up first. So I mentioned to you guys before we started this Adventures in Marine Science class with that all the freshmen take, or many of the freshmen take, and a lot of them come in, as you can imagine. I asked for a show of hands, and there's a lot of people who want to do white sharks, and there's a lot of people, and many of those students are online tonight. A lot of people want to do white sharks. A lot of people want to do marine mammals. There's a lot of interest in particular taxonomic groups. And then they get into the program and they're taking calculus and chemistry and physics. So I'm wondering if you guys can reflect back a little bit. So they're hearing it from somebody other than the faculty, what your experience was and how important you thought the foundational courses were. So I think, Jason, you mentioned this earlier, but I think if you guys could hold forth a little bit on how important you think those classes are for you or were for you. Marina, you want to take that one?
Yeah, they're super important, especially I'm the type of person that went pretty deep into like the calculus. I took Calc 1 and 2, chemistry, organic chemistry 1 and 2, and just physics especially too is something that I was trying to get away from. But as I'm getting further into my career, I'm realizing that it's going to be ever present in the ocean system. So yeah, it's definitely really important to get into that basic knowledge so that you're able to build up on that for sure.
Josh, I think you're up next. Thanks, Marina.
I would say that most of the foundational courses I still use. You know, one thing is, like James said, I mean, when you come into the program, it's like, bam, bam, you got to take some seriously hardcore chemistry, calculus courses. And for me right away, it's kind of like, whoa, okay, this is tough. But also the inspiration for me was walking down the hallway in Chapman and seeing all of these posters and these cool research projects that upper division students were doing. And I was like, I want to do that, but I got to get through these core courses first. And I promise you, once you get through those, it just opens up and there's a lot of opportunities. But I mean, today, you know, I still use math and statistics and most of those foundational courses that I took.
Cool, thanks, Josh. I lost my place. Max, you're up next.
Yeah, right there, I had no idea starting freshman year how much math is involved in marine science, and reading some of the papers, it's almost intimidating, the equations that they put from ecosystem modeling. But I would say to diverge, I think that when I started at CSUMB, I was a good writer, sure, I could write a paper, it'd take a bit, but by the end of my college career, after taking so many writing classes, I feel like it's so easy to bang out like a 4-page paper like nobody's business in the afternoon. I think that the other classes like writing classes in general help you appreciate how important it is to know the information that you're writing about before you even begin writing, to really help writing flow. So I think that even if you're taking a class that has nothing to do with marine science and you're getting writing skills, it's so important, so incredibly important.
Well, thanks, Max. Katie.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what everyone else says. Like, they're vital to the upper division classes you're going to take. And I saw a lot of my athlete friends drop out of marine science in the earlier years because like we were all squeaking by chemistry, you know, like, and they were just like, oh, it's not worth it with my schedule. And I was like, I think I got this. I'm going to keep trudging along. And it totally paid off. But those first years, like they are really hard, and the classes, you kind of like might lose your way, but definitely there, if you can get past that and kind of find some joy in it and find some, try to apply it maybe sooner than the class is actually wanting you to apply it, it's going to pay off. So.
Cool. Thanks, Katie. Jessica.
I agree that a lot of those the coursework and classwork is hard at those early stages to feel inspired. But what's interesting is I always was like, I'll never use chemistry again. And like literally 2 years ago, I was like pipetting to figure out the dissolved oxygen in a sample. I was like, oh my gosh, I definitely said this was not going to be my life. But I think that the biggest thing is to keep the inspiration going outside of those courses where you can. So like the dive program and going diving, like Jason was saying, like get out on the ord. Other things too is like volunteering with all the different research labs and groups that are around, like where you can. I mean, I volunteered with all sorts of different groups, like similar to what Alex was saying, where you're just trying to find what piques your interest and just to get involved and to see what other people are doing so that you know you can see where those classes are actually being applied and that it is worth all of the effort and time and hard work that you're putting into them to get to those upper division classes, and also then to start working there. You can see which labs you like being a part of and which labs maybe aren't the best fit for the things that really inspire you. And so I think just making sure you have that inspiration outside of those classes is really important to kind of keep you going and to know that chemistry will come back around, which is just mind-blowing sometimes.
Chemistry. Thanks, Jessica. Jason.
Yeah, I'll amplify. I like what Katie said, that if you think I got this, that's a good sign. I think it's perfectly natural to someone in under division goes into an initial class and the teacher is saying, okay, this molecule goes here, and you're like, I want to look at sharks, so like that's okay. And you gotta believe in the process. Have faith. There's a reason why you're in this class right now to get you where you want to go. It's like making a cookie, right? You only have flour in a cookie, that's going to taste lousy. Some butter, some cookies, some milk, or gluten-free, whatever it is, right? It will come to fruition. Give it time and stay the course.
Well, that's some excellent science communication there too. That analogy is fantastic. I like it. Thank you, Jason. Alex.
Yeah, I originally, when I became interested in marine science, I was a shark person. That is what I did as a little kid sitting in New Mexico. I read about sharks. I watched video about sharks. I have never done a single minute of shark research since I became a scientist, and I'm totally okay with that. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I have 9,000 different projects in my mind going right now that have nothing to do with invasive species, and that's okay, as long as I'm still doing the work I'm being paid for, doing my homework, whatever. Right. And so I think one of the cool opportunities that these students have now is that they're in these cohorts where they get to go through these classes with the students through the whole thing, which is definitely not something I think a lot of us experience. You kind of like, we had the ability to piecemeal our curriculum together, but we lost maybe some of that cohesion that these students will be getting. And so try and have fun with it with your colleagues in your cohort. Katie and I just found that we have a Geology 260 Facebook group that we created when we took that class together, and it's still up there. And we're just, you know, we did stuff like that to get through classes that we didn't think we needed, and we made them fun. And that's like one of my favorite things to think about, is like we just posted pictures of rocks so that we could study them. And so find the joy in every class and just think about the big picture, not how rocks don't apply to you know, studying sharks and marine mammals, but make a good time of it. And I think, you know, you may still want to study sharks at the end of it, and you may never have seen a single shark in your entire undergrad, and that doesn't matter. You'll get skills that teach you how to work with sharks and how to study sharks, and that's what's really important, not necessarily the like physical contact with your study species, if that is what you're still focused on.
Cool, awesome, thank you. So some of you have already touched on this a little bit, but I thought because I still find this experience out there in the world too, I wanted to ask about, now that you've been out there in the world a little bit, how do you feel that your training compares to the colleagues that you're working alongside? Now, a number of you already mentioned some of these things, and we don't have to call out particular campuses necessarily, but just to get the flavor of how your training compares to what other people coming from other places are how they're getting trained. And I think, Josh, you are up first for this one.
So I'm sure the others will add a lot of perspective. The one thing I'll mention is the preparation at CSUMB of bridging science and technology. Entering the graduate program, I felt like I was ready to go. And throughout, I mean, as an ecologist, as a researcher, and even as a teacher, I've been able to really apply technology right at the front of the research that we're doing. Like some folks mentioned earlier, the technology is evolving so fast. And so it's kind of hard to stay right at the edge of it. But CSUMB is doing that. And so that's really cool.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Max, what do you think?
So I work with a bunch of PhDs. It's kind of terrifying. They all like know way more than I do, that's for sure. But I think that at the very least, having the bridge of being able to communicate in R or being able to communicate in stats especially is super helpful. And I think because of that, it's really motivating for making me want to grow more just outside of work. And then on the other hand, when I work with my volunteers, you know, they look at you with puppy eyes and they're like, why is this happening? Or what happened? Or, you know, they're asking questions and, you know, they look at you like an authority. And I think it's super important for you not to just toss out that knowledge that you crammed for a marine bio exam for. You have to carry it with you, because once you graduate, you're now, maybe not necessarily an authority, but a figure that people will look for answers to the general public. So.
Cool, thanks, Max. Katie, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because we all want to talk about diving, and I'm going to talk about it again, but once I got into California Department of Fish and Wildlife's dive team and UC Davis's dive team, it was awesome because a majority of my colleagues had gone through the CSUMB scientific diving program. Like, if you took the whole group of scientific divers, there was just we were all this small group, a majority of them went through CSUMB and were just the awesome divers that were kind of running the show. And that was really cool. So I did not go to grad school at all, and I commend everybody who is and who does. I'm pretty sure Alex wants to be a student forever. But I didn't do that, and that wasn't really my path that I wanted, and I was able to I guess compete isn't the right word, but I was able to hang with people at CDFW that had taken a master's class or had gotten their master's, or people at Bodega Marine Lab who were on the PhD track. And I was able to hang with them and work with them because my undergrad experience and education was so strong from CSUMB. So I will say, like, you're in the right place.
Thanks, Katie. Jessica, some of that probably rings true for your experience too, huh?
Yeah, I mean, so much. So, I mean, Katie, I think you hit the nail on the head. Moving to Oregon and, you know, first starting like being transferred as a scientific diver up here to do diving, I was blown away about how amazing the training I received was. And I didn't fully realize that until I came up into this different hostile environment and was able to jump in and be totally fine. And seeing a lot of other scientific dive programs who never take their divers out of like lakes. Like I did a checkout dive in a lake and I was like, this isn't the ocean. So the diving is amazing and next level high bar. And I have seen it through all of its phases and I'm very impressed. And then I also agree with Katie that I just was sitting on an interview panel for an entry-level position with the department at Oregon. And it was amazing to see applicants that had the degrees, but not the experiences. And they didn't have those interdisciplinary skills that they've applied. They didn't have that ownership of a project like you get in capstone. And it just made me look back and be extremely grateful for all of the hands-on experiences that CSUMB offers and the ways in which you're able to take ownership of projects, whether they be class projects or like lab projects, and the skill sets that you gain there. Some people don't gain until their masters or their PhDs where they're actually in charge of a project. And to have that ownership early on in your academic career where you have mentors where you can ask questions of like, hey, my experimental design was completely off. What did I do here? It's a great learning opportunity to have that earlier on in your career, because the more you have of those opportunities, the more competitive you become when you're sitting in an interview and we're giving you a hypothetical question of, hey, your survey design is completely tanked out. What do you do now? And you're able to say, hey, I have an experience with that. This is what I did. And so I just think that the well-roundedness of CSUMB has made me extremely competitive. I don't have a PhD, but I've gone up against PhDs in interviews and sometimes have more experience. So I think that's huge.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. Jason.
Yeah, Jessica, you're stressing on the interdisciplinary disciplines and foundational importance. I think you're exactly right. I'll amplify that the communication and trying to make people care about what you do or why you do it or why they should care, right? I think it can be lacking in the scientific community, and CSUMB does a great job of having you defend your research, defend your results, and explain your results. So having the real world knowledge and applications of our curriculum and syllabus applied at CSUMB, like Katie said, being able to hang or to keep your own with what you may think are people that have more experience or more education than you do not be intimidated for a second, right? Because of your background and your discipline and your major, you're going to be okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jason.
I agree with everything everybody said. One of the things that I think for me stands out the most is the science communication aspect. I remember as an undergraduate, not only just presenting in classes and having to present your capstone, but I had the opportunity to go to a variety of different conferences and present my work. And 50% of the time people thought I was a master's or a PhD student because of how I was able to present my work and explain how it's relevant and things like that. And now as a postdoc, I'm supervising undergrads and master's students, and I have master's students and a PhD student who is also a postdoc with me who have never presented their work publicly. And that to me just blows my mind. Like, there are places in the world where you don't have to defend your dissertation verbally, which to me is a whole other thing. But that, like, because I've been doing this since I was an undergraduate, like the ability I have to communicate my science, I feel, is so much higher than some of the other colleagues I have who are at the same academic level as me. And that is just so invaluable because it transfers to interviews. If you can talk about your science, if you can be comfortable talking to people you don't know, or even just talking in front of a group of people like on Zoom, you may not have the same qualifications on paper as somebody else, but you can present yourself better and you can explain why you're better for the position or why your research matters. And that's huge. And I think that's one thing now, as someone who's looking at what students are going through and what they're learning and what they're being asked to do, CSUMB asks so much of you in that aspect. And I don't think that's happening in a lot of other places in the world, basically. So that, I think, is a really, really cool aspect of the program that I see now.
Well, thanks, Alex. So Marina, if I understand correctly, you're part of one of the largest cohorts Moss Landings have had in a while.
Yeah.
So do you have any sense of your training relative to all those other students?
Well, right now it's definitely been kind of a weird start of the semester due to
right. That's true.
And just trying to figure out what I'm gonna do eventually for thesis work. And I'm kind of at the point where I'm allowed to again just focus on like the core basics and just focus on classes, and then hopefully come spring, once everything is a little bit more relaxed, I'll be able to start right away.
Cool. All right, so you guys have touched on so many different things. I'm gonna pass by a couple questions, maybe we'll come back to them, and talk a little bit more about stuff out there in the real world. And again, I think there's been a lot of overlap because you guys are weaving these threads through many of your answers. This next question, which Jessica, you would be up first to take this one, is based on your experiences so far, what would you look for if you were in a position to hire graduates from CSUMB? So what is it? I mean, you guys have mentioned multiple times the things that you've all leveraged, but I guess, if you could describe the package, what would that package look like?
Yeah, so I've been on several of these panels on the other side, and I think it's someone who can communicate. The package is someone who has a bunch like interdisciplinary skills, but not just that they've taken classes, but they've actually implemented something with that skill set. So you took the ArcGIS class, and maybe you also bring with you a map you created, or a GLM model, or a model builder. So bringing examples, I think, are really important, that we see a lot. And then I guess we also just look for people who are passionate, and it's someone who you actually want to work with. A big part of the job market is this someone that you want to go to lunch with? So get to know the people who you're interviewing. Call them ahead of time. Like, I appreciate when someone calls me about a job. I then will help them get through HR. That could be a whole course in itself at CSUMB, is applying for jobs and how to deal with HR and getting through that first sieve of applications. So I would say that being open in communication, both communicating your skill set in a way that relates to the job, as well as being able to communicate with the people that you're going to be working with. Like, I can tell you right now that maybe out of the 50 people we interviewed, I received 3 emails afterwards that were thanking me as the interview committee. And that means something, because that shows. And I feel like UROC used to have that amazing template of like how the process of how you should go through like an interview and writing your CV. And part of it's, sending an email thanking afterwards. And that's huge. It's something that doesn't happen anymore. So it really stands out as an agency. But I think communication skills, and also having the skill set, but then being able to communicate that you have that skill set.
Thanks, Jessica. Jason, you're up next, but also I noticed when I skipped 2 questions, Max and Katie, I cut you guys opportunity to handle the questions first. So we're coming back to you guys, don't worry about it. We'll be back. Jason.
To hire a graduate, I'm looking for emotional intelligence. So I want to be sure that the graduate I'm looking at has enough gumption and confidence in themselves, can articulate themselves and their research and why their value add to my team. I'll give you a the question I actually ask quite a bit in interviews, and it's, tell me a time that you did something well, but you never want to do it again. And I'm also going to ask you, tell me a time that you failed, right? So these are the questions I'm looking for secondary and tertiary thought processes, that you're resilient, you have confidence, you have experience, you can articulate yourself constructively. Those are the things I'm looking for when hiring graduates.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. Alex.
Now, I'm embarrassed at the interview questions I ask when I hire people, because I ask things like, if you were a color, what would it be? What's your favorite Christmas movie? But I will echo what he said about the emotional intelligence, especially in this day and age. A lot of what goes into a hiring committee is looking at who you are beyond a scientist. Like, so yes, these skills are very, very important, but understanding your place in the world, your privilege in the world, and how your presence in a lab can affect other people is a really big thing that a lot of people, I don't think, spend a lot of time looking at introspectively. So if someone has the emotional intelligence to understand who they are in the world and how that affects other people, that is a huge, huge sign that even if they don't have the exact skill set that I'm looking for, they have the ability to think about what they're doing on a daily basis. And so just like understanding, like, you don't have to be a perfect package if I'm looking to hire you, but I want to be like, I want to be able to go out to lunch with you. I want to be able to have a conversation with you. And I want you to understand your role in the lab, in the project, in the world, and what you can bring to it and how you can make it more accessible to others. So that's like kind of a big, yeah, that's one of the things I look for.
Well, thanks, Alex. Marina, you're up next. I was thinking, you earlier noted that you took advantage of that. You were one of those first Coast scholars, right, who was in the early program. If you were to take one of those now, what would you look for to work on your thesis work?
Kind of the same that everybody's been kind of just wanting, not necessarily needing the experience or just having, you know, being able to, having all the skill sets. I think what I would look for mostly is just the motivation and just being able to be resilient. Like, even if you do fail, just being able to like get back out there and continue to work and just being able to grow overall. And that's what I would look for.
Cool, thanks, Marina. Josh.
I would say kind of the two top things I always look for are critical thinking and writing well. But you know, everybody else has brought up so many good points. And so I love what Jason said about resiliency. And, you know, a lot of things are kind of field specific, kind of depending on what the job is that you're looking for. So speaking from the perspective of a field ecologist, a major question I have is, you know, what do you do when something goes wrong? Because we could all, you know, I could sit here all day and talk about things going wrong. When you're working with a team out in nature, you know, out, you know, on a high distant mountain somewhere, or in the desert, or at the bottom of the ocean, those are places where you want to be able to depend on each other. And so, you know, being able to respond under situations that you've never experienced before is something that's really important.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Max.
I think that when I finally am able to move up the chain and I'm looking for someone to replace my role, I would be looking for someone who was capable of prioritizing. I think that that's a super important thing. Some people can get focused on one thing that's not necessarily as important deadline wise or product wise. That would be super important for me, being able to schedule and plan themselves and work in a structured manner that would be able to produce when necessary. I think that would be super important.
Cool, thanks. Hang on a second, I have to mute Dr. Head, who's come in here and is, I think we're hearing what's going on in the background. Katie.
Yeah, so bringing it back to diving, just because that is my priority in my job now. kind of like what Josh and Jason and a couple others were saying, like if you can be okay with schedules changing, like right now, like not even just 5 minutes ago, but right now schedules are changing. Everything is fluid, and if you know a piece of equipment breaks or your boat breaks down, your whole day might change. And I know that's kind of hard because it goes against certain personality traits of people who might not be able to work well with that. But if you can just kind of like set your mindset to be like, instead of getting upset that something has changed, I'm looking for a person who can be like, oh, this changed. Let's do A, B, C, and D. Like let's think of creative solutions to things, especially when we're on a boat in the middle of Timbuktu and we have a very limited set of tools at our disposal, and everything is on this little 30-foot boat or 10-foot boat. I just want people who have creative problem-solving skills, and I did learn a lot of that at CSUMB, actually, of just like how to use something that is not what the tool is meant for you know, to fix things. That's really important for what I'm looking for. Being really you know, okay with changing schedules a lot or last minute things. I also look for people who don't necessarily need to be encouraged to do the job, just that they have a natural motivation, which I'm sure we all have. That's the best part about being marine science, is it's not like a salesperson for some weird product. You know, we all have a passion for that. So I like, you know, of course I'll help with, you know, good team morale, but I do like people who are a little bit self-motivated and can present a product maybe like, you know, on their own, be go-getters. And yeah, I think that's the majority of what I'm looking for.
Cool, thanks, Katie. So a couple of points you made in particular set up the next two questions that I'm going to ask as a compound now, given time. First is, many of you have already said this, so you don't have to reiterate if you don't want to, but like, what inspires you about what you're doing right now? But also another one is, in what ways does your career affect the kind of life you live? Which I think would be interesting, because I think, you know, we're all probably influenced in a non-trivial way by that, and I think it'd be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. I'm going to circle back. Max, this would be your opportunity to take it away from the beginning.
I think that's heavy, definitely. I think just as an aside, because I spend so much time in the field, literally there has not been a day that has passed this summer that I've not dreamed about diving. I think that changes you profoundly, because spending so much time in the field in particular makes you live, breathe, feel, watch change. Such an incredible place, you know, our planet. I think I think so much about science now, more than I ever had when I was in undergrad, especially. So I think that's super critical. And your first question, I'm sorry?
What motivates you, or what inspires you, and then how does that choice of career influence your life? Totally.
So scientific diving, super obvious, of course, but I think one of the biggest motivators for me was getting to see some of the hugely remote places on the coastline of California and how incredibly well they're doing the further away you get from a port or access in general, in that the places that you dive or get to visit in the Catalina or at the breakwater are not necessarily representative of what the greater coast looks like, which is absolutely fantastic. And in particular, getting to be able to participate in the protection of those places drives me so much. I think that's such a huge part of what we do.
Cool, thanks, Max. So Katie, you're up.
What inspires me is endangered species restoration. Going back to the last question, actually, like I got passed over a few jobs that I thought I was well qualified for in like finfish, which I thought I was going to be all about salmon when I got out of college. I thought I was going to be like a salmon fisheries biologist, but realized that there's no diving in that. And so I just like happened to get into abalone actually. It wasn't in my big picture plan. And then when I was hitting a rut, which I hit a lot of ruts right outside of college, I was like, I just need to think about what I actually want to do, and what that was endangered species restoration. So I got involved in abalone, and they're becoming an endangered species pretty much everywhere, unfortunately. And so that inspires me, because that's my main goal, is to bring back a species, especially one as important to, you know, the human life and human experience as much as it is to the kelp forests and rocky reefs that they live in. So that inspires me. How it affects my life, I mean, I like to be in the water. I always say I'm not a land animal. I like don't run or any of that kind of shit. So I like being in the water. I dive in my free time. So to dive for work is a huge privilege, and I understand that. It makes every day different, and it makes every day fun. I have, you know, friends that are kind of in office jobs, and that's totally okay and fine. But I'm like texting them from a boat in my 9-to-5 job, and it's just like pretty awesome. It's really awesome, and it really makes. I always talk about, so there's some people pick a job for the money, and they kind of just do the job that they want to get the income they want, and then there's the people that pick the job that they love, and the income is kind of like not that important, which is going to be common in marine biology. But if like every day I'm stoked to be on the water. I'm stoked to go to work. I've had a couple jobs in marine biology that I didn't dig, but eventually I got one that I mean, it's just like exciting to go to work, and I get to see a new habitat every day and try to save this endangered species. So it definitely gives my life purpose. My job gives my life purpose, for sure.
Well, thank you, Katie. Next up, Jessica.
So I think my passion for like applied marine science, so like really having science inform management and those direct connections, I think I'm in an ideal place for that. Every day I enjoy going to work and being part of decisions that are not only affecting the future of certain fish species, as well as the fisheries and the people that are actually, you know, using those resources, and also keeping those resources for future generations. Those are all things I'm really passionate about, not only keeping things out there for the sake of the things, but also to allow some of these like communities and these families that have been in these fishing industries for years, to make sure that they don't disappear, because of that culture and that sense of place on the coast specifically is so important, and I connect so much with that. And I think being in Monterey for so long helped me do that, like going down to some of those docks and you know, sampling some of those large boats that are like, you know, offloading market squid, and seeing how like their family run businesses, and all of that is really important to me, and knowing that my science is helping ensure that not only for myself, but for future generations really inspires me every day and gives me a passion to work hard and to make sure that like making tough decisions is never easy, but making sure that those decisions are the best for the most people. And I think when it comes to how that has affected my life, as in most marine science, you move where the work is. So I'm lucky to have a partner who's in computer science, and he's a little bit more mobile. So as I've moved, he's been able to move with me as well. But that doesn't go without like strain. I mean, for the past couple of years, I've been commuting an hour and a half, which is not like a California hour and a half of like sitting in traffic and going 10 miles. It's like an hour and a half of distance in Oregon to the coast. But now, you know, with these times, we're able to telework, and so we're able to like live together in the same space. But those things are hard, and as you move forward in your life, some things become priorities. Like it's a priority for me to be, you know, in the same space as my partner. So that's moving into the policy world. I do a lot of traveling, and so balancing that life work balance is hard. But it's also, when you're passionate about what you do, you're able to make those decisions more easily. And I think being as passionate I am, I feel like I can't imagine life any different. And I can't imagine not moving to where the work is at this point in my life. I still find myself being a nomad in the sense of wherever the work is and I'm needed, I'm going to go.
Thanks, Jessica. Jason.
Yes, sir. Those are both excellent and very kind of centering questions. Personally, what motivates me, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in getting the science and getting the data specifically so the best possible decisions can be made. So I'm inspired by that correlation there. Flying into hurricanes, there's risk there, obviously. I do believe in the higher calling and serving a greater good. And it's just about being okay with the sacrifices, you know, and the time away from friends and family, but being out there in the field, exposed, in the air, on the water, in the oceans, in the lakes and the rivers, being out there, getting the data so that people's lives can be impacted for the better, hopefully, for generations we're talking about. Sign me up.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Alex.
Build off of what a lot of people said. When I first started doing this, it was field work. That is what got me out of bed in the morning, being able to go get on the boat, do some data collection, go in the water, scuba dive. That drove me. That made me choose the PhD program that I did. I wanted to do science diving for my PhD. And so that is what like really drove me for quite a while. I will admit that it became a bit jaded with academia, and I kind of just finished my PhD out of spite. So now I'm in a different position where I'm a postdoctoral researcher. I'm a conservation scientist, not necessarily a marine. I mean, you know, I'm focused on marine systems, and I don't think I will ever transfer to terrestrial. I will, even though I live away from the coast, I will do everything I can to get back there as soon as possible because, yeah, like Katie, I would give anything to be in the water all day, every day. But some of the ways I think that some of the things that keep me driven and keep me passionate now is just reflecting on what my experience was as an undergraduate and a graduate student as a Black woman in science and making sure that the journey is different for everybody else who comes after me. I had one African-American teacher my entire life, and that is just too few for someone who goes through the system. And so just making sure that women of color, people of color are just exposed, because there are thousands of marine scientists out there who don't look like your kind of stereotypical marine science, and just making sure that they're exposed and people have role models to look up to is something that I'm just like, that is what drives me now. Just looking at the equity and the division and how, who gets to do science and where they get to do it is something that just like fuels my fire right now. And even though I'm getting paid to do other stuff, like I said, I have all these side projects that I'm just putting my heart and soul into. And for me, that's a whole lot now, especially because I can't do the field work. I can't be in the water. And so I've got to find the other aspect of why I got into science, being a representative of, you know, what is still a minority in STEM, especially marine ecology and marine biology, is something that I just like, I take pride in, and I try to do my best to be a good role model. So that's something that I think about a lot. And for me, that does impact my life on the daily. I do a lot of work with different groups. And so, but other than that, like, yeah, like as soon as I can get back into the field, and as soon as I can get to the point where I'm like touching water and touching organisms and being in the system that I want to work in, that is where I want to get. And I have a lot of things to do to get there. But for me, again, yeah, it's just like, go where the work is. Like, I'm in the middle of Canada right now, and that is where I'm being paid to be. But as soon as somebody pays me to live on the coast, I will be there.
Cool, thank you, Alex. Marina.
Yeah, so kind of going off of what everybody's been saying, the field work is kind of what's gotten me motivated in doing all of this. It was actually not until my second year of undergrad I went to my counselor, and we're kind of just talking about the courses that I should take next semester. And she noted that I was a marine science student, so she said, "Oh, you might as well take open water next semester." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." Wasn't really even thinking about it, but obviously diving is like got me motivated to finish off my undergrad. And Yeah, I also forgot to mention that I'm also working with the Southwest Fisheries, conducting steelhead population surveys in the Carmel River. So that's also something really awesome to be able to be a part of that endangered species. And yeah, kind of going off of what Alex was saying about like representation of people of color. I come from migrant field working parents, and I also was had to be part of that, and going from doing hard labor out in the fields to becoming a field scientist is kind of you know, working my way up there. Is something that I'm really proud of.
Cool. Thanks, Marina. Josh.
So like others, and like I mentioned earlier, diving is what really got me into this. But during my time at CSUMB, I became really inspired just by working with a team to actually pursue questions that nobody in the world has ever answered before. And so, you know, throughout our conversation, we've mentioned all these tools and these different scientific technical skills, and diving became kind of one thing of many that I learned to use as a tool for, you know, pursuing intellectual curiosity and actually figuring out why the world works the way it does, and using that information to then, you know, create management practices in a future that actually, you know, builds on the science. And so that's been really inspirational for me. And you know, the way it affects the way my career affects my life is, you know, I feel privileged and grateful to be able to do that and to be able to pursue science and these questions every day, and to get paid to do that.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Well, thank you, everybody. You know, we were going to do, I'm not sure how we're thinking we're going to see how things wrapped up, but that, you know, I want to be conscious of people's time, and I think those answers are some of the strongest answers you guys have given all evening, and I think we'll probably end with that. And I want to thank all of our panelists in a huge way for participating. You know, if somebody asked me that last question, I would say that working with you guys is what makes it possible. And I'm going to start crying. So we're recording, so I'm not going to do that. Working with you guys is awesome. And I think that this is manifestly true for everybody else who participated in this event tonight. So really nice job. I'm going to invite everybody to unmute and give a round of applause to everybody.
Wait, no beer?
Good work, everybody.
Thank
we
you.
will be recording this, or we did record it, so we will be posting it once I get it from Matt Jew, who I made a co-host, and then he immediately took over recording responsibilities. And assuming I get it back from Matt, we'll be posting it on the Marine Science website, and so it'll be accessible if there are people that you want to show it to, or direct people towards it, or if you know people who didn't get a chance to chime in and see it tonight, that'll be a way to do it. And you know, I hope that we're able to keep in contact with all of you guys as you continue to do good stuff. And thank you again so much, and thank you to all of you who've stayed with us into the evening to listen to these guys. And I hope that you're as inspired as the rest of us are. And with that, I am going to bring it to a close. Thank you so much, everybody.